Good evening, everybody. I am Stephen Hemrick, the publisher, and this is Richard Schneider, the editor and founder of the Gay and Lesbian Review. We want to thank you so much for coming tonight, and especially thank all the panelists, some of whom are in the UK, so stayed up late for this event called Queer Power, which is in commemoration of UK's first gay pride parade, which happened on July 1st, 1972. Dan Glass is the author of United Kingdom: From the Legends of the Gay Liberation Front to the Queers of Tomorrow, copies which are available and some people have already purchased through the Eventbrite event page and include a free subscription to the magazine. Dan is also an award-winning activist, mentor, performer, and writer who uses music and performance to catalyze love, soul, revolution, and justice in our communities confronting injustice. He's an educator from Training for Transformation that works for social justice through grassroots community education, and that was born out of the anti-apartheid movement. He has been named one of Attitude Magazine's campaigning role models for LGBT youth, is the recipient of a G&LR Radio Heroes Award for gay rights activism, and was awarded the Activist of the Year at the Sexual Freedom Awards in 2017 for his contributions to sex-positive queer healthcare and human rights movements for social justice. Ted Brown is an LGBTQ activist who helped organize the first gay pride parade in the UK and became known as the man who held the first mass kiss-in that day. We'd love to hear about that. He's a former member of UK's Gay Liberation Front, at least I believe it's former. He has also been a legal caseworker, journalist, and yoga teacher. Born in New York to Jamaican parents, he came out in England to his family in 1965, and they were very supportive. He's also found inspiration when hearing of the Stonewall Uprising, motivated by heroes like Huey Newton and Bayard Rustin to expand queer rights, to demand calls for justice for all. Ted became active in UK's GLF and lived in a GLF commune for 3 years. He has also written for the Gay Times, co-founded Black, Lesbian, and Gays Against Media Homophobia, and was involved in the NAACP. Abby Garrettson is a queer advocate from St. Petersburg, Florida, and current student, our youngest on the panel, at Boston University, where she's pursuing a dual degree in journalism and sculpture. She has been doing online and in-person advocacy for the last 2 years, most recently as the leader of Say Gay Walkout at Gibbs High School in St. Petersburg. And she's helped organize walkouts throughout Pinellas County. She's coordinated teen lobbying, been the leader of her local GSA, organized gender-affirming makeup class, and spoke at middle schools about her activism and using your voice. Sergei Kazov-Kasia, that's right, is an award-winning Russian journalist and writer working for Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty, currently residing in Latvia. Before the Russian invasion of Ukraine, Sergei was based in Moscow. He's the author of 2 novels, A Different Childhood and A Gospel According to, which now is being translated into English. Both novels reflect the life of a gay person, first in the former Soviet Union and then in modern-day Russia. Finally, Amanda Lugg, who emigrated to New York City from the UK in 1993, began working in HIV/AIDS direct services as its evening head chef for God's Love We Deliver. Then in 1998, as a community organizer for the Gay Men's Health Crisis, and in 2000 as Director of Advocacy in LGBT African Services Committee, as LGBT programming for the community-based human rights organization, the African Services Committee, that provides health, housing, legal, and social support services to over 6,000 immigrants each year, and where she ran its LGBTQ health and wellness program. In September of last year, she assumed the role of interim co-executive director. So with further ado, I would like to pass it over to Dan.
So I'll do a little reading of United Queerdom. And really the backbone of this book is interviews with Ted, Nettie, Stuart and Andrew, dear friends from the Gay Liberation Front. I wasn't there in 1972. I got involved in the Gay Liberation Front later in 2016, 17, when at the time in London, a third of our queer spaces were being shut down because of Brexit, because of the government and the turbo capitalism, the hostile environment, etc. And I remember standing in the corner, in the smokers' corner of my favorite club, and we were just talking about what we were going to do to stop the closure of queer spaces. And we were so busy firefighting. We wanted to do something more comprehensive. And my friend was like, you need to get yourself to Gaze the Word bookshop in central London, educate yourself about queer history. And that's where the idea of Queer Tours of London, A Mince Through Time, was born. And I read Blowing the Lid by Stuart Feather, our friend and one of the founders of the Gay Liberation Front. And that's when we met up and the new relationships were formed, which we started meeting again around the 50th anniversary of the Sexual Offences Act, which led to partial decriminalisation of homosexuality in Britain. On a windy December evening, 100 people gathered on the cobbled streets of Covent Garden in central London in a wild array of colour. Everyone was clutching a personal item, a photo, a piece of clothing, a flower. Auntie Sharon, the open mic cabaret, was about to begin. We asked people to bring with them an image of someone, personal or unknown, to contribute to a collective statue of those who have made us who we are today, in an act of collective consciousness and a ritual of grief and celebration never seen before. Cramped in the Caravan Club interior, it is easy to imagine the fog of smoke and queer bodies which filled the tiny private members club. The bar's exterior was covered in blown up 1930s police reports and scandalized letters of complaint from undercover police seeing sexual perverts, lesbians and sodomites dancing very close together and wriggling their posteriors, as if that's a bad thing. At gay clubs then and now, sex, drugs and swing have always mingled with grief. We started the night playing Fuck the Pain Away as my mind tingled back to stomping the dance floors in clubs around the corner. As the song faded, one after another guests, young and old, recalled predecessors thrown in jail, beaten to death and consumed by AIDS. Waves of goosebumps passed through the room as one by one the audience stood at the queer grief altar at the front to share their loss. Quote, I don't know what's worse, being explicitly targeted as a gay man or invisibilized out of existence as lesbian or trans, shared an older glamorous lady, followed quickly by a wild-eyed, nervous but striking young man who trembled as he recalled coming out to his father the previous week. Lindsay then came bounding next to the stage, an activist from Lesbian and Gay Support the Migrants, LGSM, a movement inspired by Mark Ashton and Lesbian and Gay Support the Minors in the 1980s, if anyone's seen the film Pride. Lindsay said, right now, multiple queer women are trapped in Yarlswood Detention Centre, facing deportation back to face violence and persecution in Commonwealth countries. She breaks off. At the last anti-deportation centre demonstration, I was trying to see their eyes, but I couldn't reach them. I couldn't talk to them. I couldn't hold them. All I could connect with were the tissues they were waving behind the prison windows, said Lindsay as she held her heart and found her chair. Kat Kai Kolkes, sparkling in a shimmering black outfit, then came out from behind the curtain and got ready to perform a song from her musical. It was a tribute to American Matthew Shepard, who in 1998 was battered to death aged 22, sparking a global movement against LGBTQIA plus hate crime. After the song, she said, I spent years wondering if I should step in front of a bus, slowly pronouncing each word, giving it its own stage, or if it's better than being tied to a post and beaten to death, giving the audience a knowing hug with her eyes and step down. Next up came Nell, with fiery red hair and a floor-length sequin dress, who opened their lungs and embraced the room. Our entire queer culture is perceived by the outside world often as about being screwed, high, exploited, or being promiscuous in one sense or another. But there's more than that to being queer. It is about being together, being free. One speaker to go, and I winked at Andrew that it was his time to stand up. In 1970, Andrew was a journalist at the Times in Fleet Street, London. The first demonstration for the G&LR was held in Highbury Fields on the 27th of November that year. Andrew read about it and thought, I've got to get down there, and joined the G&LR the following Wednesday. He suggested that the country needed an LGBT newspaper and urged it to be called Gay News. Gay then being the defiant new term covering all genders and all queers. It became the first LGBT plus paper since the partial decriminalisation of homosexuality in 1967. Andrew knew acutely about the homophobic persecution Auntie Sharon brought to life that night, as he recalled 1960s gay clubs where you were not allowed to touch while dancing. He and the G&LR were hounded by police for their radical drag stunts as they dressed up as nuns in the Albert Hall, shutting down queerphobic religious festivals and bookstores selling material that medicalized homosexuality as a sin, creating radical drag communes, underground queer literature networks, and gay days in public parks. The Gay Liberation Front urged the queer community to unite around a simple set of demands. Self-made pamphlets, zines, and newsletters were the DIY vehicles that helped forge solidarity of thoughts, galvanizing citizens who refused to remain silent, and ultimately propelling forward the movement for the emancipation of queer people. These vehicles called for an end to discrimination against homosexuals in employment and sex education, and confronted the unequal age of consent and the pathologization of sexual and gender difference by the medical establishment. Andrew then faced the audience quietly and named a long list of those who are with us and aren't now, particularly Gay Liberation Front activists lost to HIV and AIDS or hepatitis. The crowd went completely silent as he began to describe the liberated 1960s for the heterosexual community as a nightmare of a world for queers and minorities full of secrecy and fear. Things have changed, Andrew said. This event is commemorating the 50th anniversary of the partial decriminalisation in 1967. Our aim at the Gay Liberation Front has been and will always be absolute freedom for all, dead or alive. So we demand an apology from the Queen for gay persecution, pardons. Andrew surveyed the room with a grin and a sassy hand, reaching for his hip, suspends hanging in the air, and yelled, "Pa, we'll issue any pardons when we feel like it." He left the crowd stunned. As whiskered waiters sashayed through the packed crowd, a cheer rose as he invited everyone to pick up a stone, each stone symbolizing a lost LGBTQIA plus ancestor, to walk under the London moonlight and drop them in the River Thames. As we stepped back into the smoky Soho night air, everyone was grateful to be able to touch one another, to hold hands in the street and to talk. The tide was out. We all braved the slippery steps to throw our stones to the riverbank shore, where so many sex workers and queers have drowned, vanished, committed suicide, or been murdered, to remember those who can speak no longer. It was time to draw a line in the sand. Thank you. That was one of my favorite parts of the book. And yeah, thank you so much to Gay and Lesbian Review for sharing the link to buy it as well. Let's go. Maybe we start with you, Ted, because I'm talking about you. You were there. So maybe if we talk about what it was like at the beginnings of Pride in the UK. I mean, maybe Ted, you do the little potted history for, I'm sure most people know, but the little potted history about the transatlantic connection, which gave birth to the movement in London. But over to you, Ted. The floor is yours. Thanks so much for joining us.
Okay, well, now, hopefully everybody here knows roughly the outline of the story of Stonewall, which is that on the 28th of June, 1969, the police tried to carry out their customary raid of a small bar in New York. And for a number of reasons, one of which is a lesbian being dragged into a police car and shouting at the crowd around them, why are you just standing there? Do something. People started to fight back, and they threw rocks, threw some of their clothing, shouted abuse, and actually apparently terrified the police, who ran into the building and spent almost 3 days holed up while an increasingly furious crowd gathered, and gay liberation was born. There had been another incident some years before in a small bar called The Cat, I think. I'm trying to research on that, but that didn't become famous. Now, at that time, on the 28th of June, 1969, I was 19 years old. I was living in South London in Blackheath, and I was trying to adjust to a fairly isolated gay life. I suppose you call it adjustment because I didn't really know any other gay people. I had only just left school the year before. I had come out to my mother 5 years before in 1965, and I was motivated to come out to her by the suicide of a friend of mine who I believe was gay. And I know that his family was intensely homophobic and that he was in no position to come out. And when he died, I realized that I was going to be alone because I'd lost one of my very best friends. I came out to my mother. I told her at age 15, Mum, I think I'm becoming homosexual, because those were the only words that I knew at that time. Now, I knew that my mother would be supportive as long as I was doing something that wasn't hurting or malicious towards other people. But I was actually delighted that she not only was able to back me up and said, you are going to have to deal with the hostility people have towards Black people, but also to the hostility people have towards gay people, homosexual people. Because when she had been in the civil rights movement in America, just by chance, she had heard one of the speeches by a man called Bayard Rustin, who was an openly gay Black man who had helped organize the Great March on Washington, at which Martin Luther King gave his I Have a Dream speech, right? So that was a real boost for me. But my mother died only a few months after I came out to her. So I had to go and live on my own, having been previously in a children's home along with my younger brother and sister. So I was in this flat reading an article, a very flippant article about, which said something along the lines of queens with their handbags are fighting off police officers in New York. But I had no way of finding out where this was. But I did cartwheels all around my living room that there were people fighting back. It wasn't until a year later. Oh, hang on. Oh, It wasn't until a year later that I was walking through the underground station in London, and I saw a poster which said, "This is Harold. This is his birthday, and this is his present." And the poster was of Harold's face, and the present was a very attractive looking rent boy. And the film being promoted was Hollywood's first ever film mainly focusing on gay men, called The Boys in the Band. So I hot-footed down to the Odeon Leicester Square and saw this film on my own. The cinema was just over half full because most of the people there were other gay men. As you can imagine, the straight society wasn't really that interested in this gay movie, which was very daring for them to have shown at that time. And I had mixed feelings about the film. It did have some very good points. It had some very difficult points as well. But the one thing that annoyed me about it was it had two characters, Emery, who's the very flamboyant gay man, and Ben, a Black librarian who's very sophisticated and well educated. And in this film, which is set at Harold's party, apparently Ben allows Emery to racially abuse him. It makes Emery feel better about himself because the other men are insulting Emery for being a flamboyant gay man. The rest of them are apparently straight. Anyway, I left the cinema with mixed feelings, and there were a number of people leafleting against this film, saying it was a misrepresentation of gay life. And they turned out to be from the Gay Liberation Front, and they invited, the leaflets they were giving out were inviting people to their next meeting at the London School of Economics. So a little while later, I tootled along to the London School of Economics and walked along the corridors amongst the students and had the rather interesting phenomenon of walking and asking other students, did they know where the meeting was being held by a bunch of homosexuals? So I found the room. There was a lot of people, a panel door with a glass space in the middle. And I looked through and there were a whole lot of people talking and being very animated, but I didn't have quite the nerve to enter. But I took up another leaflet that was lying by that open door, and I did turn up at another meeting later. And that was the start of my meeting other gay people, and even more significantly, not only other gay people, but people who were absolutely angry about the way that we had been treated, not only through our entire lives, but back through history for more than 2,000 years, certainly in Britain. And that was my introduction to the Gay Liberation Front. And I've not looked back since. So there we are, that's the start. I don't know where I should go from there.
Thank you, Ted. Thanks, Lee. I guess, you know, I've been thinking a lot about, who has been thinking a lot about what's been going on in America recently, obviously with the return of Roe versus Wade, and obviously all the amazing that across America are doing, and particularly been thinking about you, Abby, with all your activism with against the Don't Say Gay bill. And I guess just a little kind of segue into Ted and Abby. Ted, what was your favorite demonstration you were part of in any time since you were part of the Gay Liberation Front? And what was the kind of magic ingredients of that demonstration, which we can incorporate into protests today? And
I think the magic ingredient for me was Am I muted? No,
No,
I'm okay.
you're good. You're good.
Yeah, was the march that took place, in fact, a year before the Gay Pride March by the Gay Liberation Front. The first public march that we ever had through central London was the Gay Liberation Front youth group demonstration against the unequal age of consent laws. Now, Dan has already mentioned the 1967 Sexual Offences Act, which related to prostitution and homosexuality. And that broke down some of the laws against homosexuality, but allowed sex only between men over the age of 21, strictly in private. And by private, they meant that if you lived in a block of flats and you were with your lover, you couldn't actually have sex with your partner because there were other people in the building. So basically you had to live in a home of your own, be ultra middle class or something like, or live in a tent before you could actually have sex with your partner. So we had this demonstration. I think it was on the 26th of August, 1971, which was organized when we were organizing our meetings in Notting Hill Gate. And we had our march. We started at Hyde Park and marched to Trafalgar Square, which is the reverse direction of the famous Gay Pride March, which happened a year later. But at the start of that march, by that time, when we were organizing that march, the protest consent laws, which was 16 for straight people, but 20.
I think we lost sound.
Okay, sorry.
There we go.
I don't know where we've lost. I have to go back. I won't go back to at all. Actually, the law was very strict about sex between men. By the time when we were organizing it, I was 20 and incapable of having sex with anybody, any other gay man. But by the time we had the march, I was 21. And so we decided that we would make a very visceral protest against that law by actually kissing each other in Hyde Park at the start of the march. And there is a photograph that somebody took of me kissing various guys in the park. And I only realize now that I could have got between 5 and 7 years in prison for that. I knew there was a risk at the time, but I didn't realize quite how severe it was. And that kiss was recreated later in the following year in the Great March, where everybody gathered together on the plinth of Nelson's column in Trafalgar Square and kissed each other and we were dressed in such a way that you couldn't tell if it was women kissing women, women kissing men, men kissing men, or men kissing women. And that picture is the front cover of the first book about the Gay Liberation Front called No Bath, But Plenty of Bubbles by Lisa Power. And if you want to know about the real grassroots start of the Gay Liberation Front, that is the first book to go to. So, yeah. So that was the first move that we did, and that was really meaningful to me, partly because it was an echo of the demonstrations that my mother had been involved in the United States as part of the National Association of the Advancement of Colored People, the civil rights movement against racism in America. I had always admired the people, particularly the young people who faced the police in those days, because the kind of murders and assaults that resulted in the death of George Floyd was extremely common. And people should be aware that if they ever see film of those demonstrations where the police were setting Alsatian dogs on people, fire hoses that could knock over cars on these young people, mostly teenagers, you will realize just what courage it took. And I felt that what I was doing in this KISS and this organized First March was in tribute to that, and also a part of the link between Bayard Rustin, an openly gay man, and the civil rights movement, and the gay rights movement and lesbian movement in Britain. It was what they call intersectionality at the very start. So, okay, that's me for a moment. I'll take a breath now. And
thank you, Ted. You're always so inspirational and eloquent. Actually, Sergey, Abby, Amanda, Stephen, Richard, have you got just short questions for Ted before we go on to Abby?
There is a question from Steve Hassam. What happened to the GLF in the UK?
Well, the GLF functioned very actively for about 3 or 4 years. They set up a number of communes because all of us agreed at one point that every one of us had grown up in a heterosexual environment, and we felt it would be a really great idea for us to live together and set our own lifestyles, our own criteria, and make a little world of ourselves against the hostility that we had all faced. Then it went into abeyance for a while, but it had initiated a whole number of establishments and organizations that were long-lasting. It was from the Gay Liberation Front that the first gay newspaper, Gay News, actually was formed. We set up the Gay Pride phone, oh gosh, just lost for a moment. Like a kind of Samaritans on the phone for lesbians and gays. People could phone up for advice and support. There were also other little small communes set up around the country. There were certainly 7 in Britain, and it was at one of these communes that I met my partner, and we lived together for 50 years after the communes broke up, and my partner just died on the 31st of December, 2021. That's a whole nother story because he died of dementia and suffered homophobic abuse in the first care home that he was in. And we are hoping to make that an issue because older LGBT people, and particularly trans people, have a phenomenally awful time in care homes, and we hope to try to address that as soon as we possibly can. So yeah, that was one of the, what happened to GLF. And as Dan has described, it went into abeyance. Many of the people involved in the Gay Liberation Front continued individual acts on behalf of the LGBT community, but then it was revived around 2016, and we started our meetings again in the LSE at around 2016. And we're fully revived. More people are wanting to join, and we feel really reinvigorated. So, yeah.
Amazing, Ted. Thank you so much. Abby, how are you? You know, you're continuing, holding the torch that Ted started and is continuing to do. By the way, Ted is not only very eloquent, but also very humble. I'm writing a new book, which is an integrated walking tour guide to London, very much inspired by the queer walking tour book in New York. And this is just one of the many maps with like 2,000 case studies of queer protests and parties and meetings and club nights. And I literally wake up every morning thinking and writing about Ted because he's been so prolific all over London. So there's many more. But yeah, Abby, how are you? Thank you so much for joining. I'd love to hear more about what the situation is. Can you hear us? Yeah, cool.
Hello.
Over to you.
Oh, just about me, what I'm doing, what's going on here.
Yeah, please just like say what you're currently involved with, what the political situation is, what's been keeping your spirit alive, how people can support. Just speak from the heart, share, because it's incredible what you've been doing.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think my game plan was I was kind of go how I got here, what I'm currently doing, what the future plan is. So hi, my name is Abby Gerritsen. I am 18 years old. I just graduated this May from St. Petersburg, from Gibbs High School in St. Petersburg, Florida. And like you guys said, I'm moving up to Boston in fall. Yeah, so a little bit about me is I essentially grew up in the queer community. My parents are two women who met 30 years ago in college, and about 20 years ago, they moved to St. Petersburg, Florida to start a family in an up and coming queer city. And then they had me and my twin brother. From there, I essentially grew up leading conversations about what queerness looked like, what a queer household could look like, what the definition of a family could be at the age of 6, until I entered middle school, where I myself came out as queer, and then continued on to high school to continue to lead my GSA and a lot of other events. As far as how I got into activism, I would say I more formally got into it when I was 16 during the pandemic. I started producing content online about the pandemic, as well as attending the Black Lives Matter protests and creating content regarding that. From there, while I was in quarantine, I also led a group of teen lobbyists in partnership with Equality Florida to speak about the anti-trans youth bill, as well as the trans sport ban that was happening the year prior. And we met with them virtually. And then, I don't know, I guess that was kind of the start of a lot of the really harmful anti-queer legislation that's been going on both within the country and within the state of Florida. And so this past year, when we heard about the Don't Say Gay bill, I was really horrified. The bill itself, for those of you guys who aren't familiar, is prohibiting the discussion of sexuality and gender within classrooms ages kindergarten through 3rd grade and in any other grade in a means that's not deemed appropriate. It is inherently a green light for the silencing of any discussion of queerness in the classroom, and puts a lot of students at risk from being able to learn about themselves and find a community to support them within their school. For me, I took it especially hard because it was saying that how I grew up, who I was, my family, the epitome of me, was inherently wrong and inappropriate. And as someone that had kind of previously established myself as, I don't know, queer leader in my school, I had a lot of students reaching out to me and telling me how upset that they were, how frustrated they were, how nervous they were. And so I reached out to my other GSA members, some different teachers. We talked about, let's do a protest. Let's do something to feel like we have a say in this and have a part in this, even though we aren't able to actually vote on any sort of legislation. And around that time, a dear friend of mine, well, friend now, Jack Petticaz had in St. Augustine had released a statement encouraging students to all hold walkouts on a specific date. And so I took it upon myself to start messaging every high school in Tampa Bay that I could get in contact with, as well as every news station the local news station that would respond to my emails. And we did a big walkout. It was on the day, I don't remember the specific date now, it's kind of blurred. But I went ahead the day before and wrote, "We say gay sincerely. on the middle of my school's courtyard. And then during one of our classes, we had a couple hundred students all come out. Students spoke. We had a choir at the school sing. We had a moment of silence. And then at the end, we had every student that attend signed their name by the message I wrote on the ground. And during that, we had 2 news helicopters that were filming, as well as I was sending videos and pictures to every news site that I could get in contact with. Just try to spread the message that students are upset and don't want this thing to be passed. I guess it's kind of kicked up from there. A lot of me, as well as a lot of advocates around Florida, have been continued to reach out and give them platforms. I got to be in Teen Vogue. I've gotten to do writing for them. I got to go to the Webbies, and I won with Will, Javier, and Jack to receive award for the Social Movement of the Year. And yeah, so we're kind of just keeping moving with it, I guess. Sorry, I'm a little nervous. Yeah, from there, what we're doing right now, I'm currently working with Prism Florida, which is a nonprofit in Florida that works to spread sexual health resources throughout the state. And I'm a part of their Stay Gay initiative, which is addressing rainbow capitalism and trying to encourage companies to continue to support the queer community all year long, rather than just outside of Pride. I've been leading events, or I've been leading other students to the Roe versus Wade protests. We've gone to a good handful now. We've gone to different meetings, and I've done a plethora of other little events since then. Yeah, I guess that's sort of the vibe, sort of what's going on.
Wow, thank you so much, Abby. Your strength and like commitment and perseverance and joyful spirit is so inspiring. Amanda, Sergey, Ted, Stephen, have you got any questions for Abby? Or any thoughts?
Let's see. Yes.
Amanda does. Oh yeah, after Stephen. Yeah.
For Abby, were Scientologists involved in the passage of the Don't Say Gay bill, and does your activism include reaching out to the Scientology community?
For me personally, I think a majority of the Scientology community is in, I want to say Orlando, but I'm not sure. So we don't personally have a big Scientology connection in St. Pete. I've not personally worked with it, so I'm not 100% sure. So yeah, sorry, that would have to be a question for activists in that specific area.
No, that's the answer that the person was seeking. There you go. Somebody one, Dan?
Yeah, Amanda, over to you. Thanks for the question, Stephen. Oh, Amanda, you're on mute.
Sorry. That was so it was so great to hear. And you're 18. That's brilliant. Good for you, Abby. Are you able to continue the work around the Don't Say Gay bill once you move to Boston? Do you think there's a large enough advocacy contingent in Florida around this issue?
Yeah, so I definitely think so. I think, well, for one, I think the legislation that's being passed against queer youth is something that's kind of happening across the country.
Yeah.
Especially with the Roe versus Wade, that passing is threatening things like from contraception to queer marriage. So I know that there will continue to be opportunities wherever I go. I also will continue to be working with organizations in Florida like Prism, as well as my other advocate friends that I've met because of this process that are all over the country. So yeah, my family is still here. My friends are still here. I will still be here parts of the year. So I definitely will be continuing my work in the state, as well as I'm viewing Boston as kind of in addition to that, right. More resources and more people that I will get to work with and expand what I'm doing.
Well, it's great to hear. Thanks.
Oh, thank you, Amanda, and thank you, Abby. Abby, please do, and this goes for everyone as well, write any links in the chat of how people can follow and support all the amazing things you're doing. But just lastly, I'd be like, because we've got amazing writers, activists, artists from America, Britain, Russia, and beyond, I imagine, Canada, I think as well. How can people support the next stage of your incredible journey?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest thing is to continue to uplift the voices of both the youth and activists across Florida. There's a lot of different ways to support the community. I know also every city right now is dealing with stuff like abortion funds. There's also different organizations like the C Initiative or PRISM that raise money to help continue their outreach that they're doing in a specific area. I guess for me and my work specifically, I guess is keep an eye out and, you know, continue to uplift the youth of the queer, or the queer youth, uplift the voices of the queer youth, sorry.
Oh, amazing. Thank you so much, Abby. That was brilliant. Oh my God. We have a question. Maybe this one's for you, Ted, from Justin. Thank you, Justin. It is important that LGBTQ folks in the US and New York don't think we're the only ones who stood up for our rights. We in Los Angeles know this because our protest at the Black Cat Bar here preceded the Stonewall uprising at NYC. This one's for you, Ted. What is the singular parallel, or Amanda, because you're also British, what is the singular parallel watershed incident in England where LGBTQ folks stood up to the harassment and persecution by police or politicians? Is this incident celebrated in Britain? How can we in the US share this story? Who wants to jump in with that?
I think all I could speak to on that, in my lived experience, is actually my first queer demonstration, which was with outrage in Piccadilly Circus, and it was the kissing against Section 28. Yeah, that was my first.
You were there?
Yeah. I was there, and then I soon let that, because what was that, like 91 maybe?
The kissing was 93, the winking 92, I think.
Okay, 93, and then that ended that year. I moved to New York. Yeah, so that really, that was the first for me. Section 20, so that was around Section 28, which is very much like what's happening now in Florida, I think. You know, where no state monies can be used to talk about, you know, queer families, queer education or anything like that. And yeah, we had the same thing under Thatcher in the 80s, which lasted, I think, until officially, right, until Blair like signed off on it. But but Ted probably has the best example with back in the 60s.
Oh, thank you, Amanda. That's so exciting to hear that you were there at the protest. Everyone, I'm sharing a few links to amazing Section 28 activism. Sergey, there's so many parallels with what Abby just shared in terms of cultural erasure and, you know, responding with writing, expression, building connections. And if anyone hasn't read the work, I'm going to share the links to Sergey's incredible writing here now. We met in Moscow, what was it, 3 years ago? And I'm such Sergey's incredible writing about queer life and general human rights in Russia and beyond, particularly more poignant with everything that's going on now. And it's so lovely to see you, Sergey. So over to you. Again, just like Abby did, just speak from the heart about where you're at, what you've been doing, what you're writing about now, the hard times, the good times.
Yeah, hi everybody. So actually, now in Russia, I see the question from somebody, will Sergey describe the LGBTQ emergencies in Russia now? In Russia now, I think everything is divided before the war with Ukraine and after the war, and the LGBTQ questions as well. So we see this attack on human rights in general, as well as on LGBTQ rights and all the minors' rights in Russia since the beginning of 2010. And in 2014, when Russia annexed Crimea from Ukraine, they did what they usually do to draw the attention of populations from the real problems. They start to speak about traditions, traditional families, etc., and they start to attack groups that represent some other points of view or ways of living. And so in 2014, back in 2014, they actually voted this law that banned propaganda of non-traditional relationships among minors. And these, I mean, in the beginning, it wasn't that harsh. They didn't find anybody with that. Then they fined few people, but it was not used massively, right? Now they're talking about extending this law to the whole population in general. So you couldn't speak about LGBTQ issues at all with anybody, not only with minors, not only using internet, whatever, Facebook, social networks, or journalism. You just cannot mention this topic at all. They didn't vote this bill yet. I think they will do it in autumn when the parliament will come back from vacation. But the thing is that in Russia, the situation in general is so horrible now for everybody that LGBTQ is just one tiny bit of it. I mean, the emergencies for Russians, for all Russians who don't support the current regime, is like to cope with the situation, try to cope, or try to leave the country. The same is for LGBTQ people from Russia. We have still the same problems. I mean, we have still the same problems that we had before the war. We have Chechnya. There's a southern republic in Russia where they actually kill people in general, and they kill LGBTQ people as well because they're LGBT. They were killing them before the war. They are killing them now. But the problem is that the attention of journalists and all the public and international attention is actually the war side, not on the LGBTQ issues, which is understandable. And this is why I have few examples of of gay people, and I think lesbian girls as well from Russia, who moved away before February 24. And they were waiting for their decisions or for their meetings in different countries to get refugee status, etc. And they moved on different grounds, but I mean, as these are people that I know, it was usually connected with the LGBTQ activity or life, or they were persecuted unjustly by Russian police, etc. And so everything is blocked now for them, whether they're in Finland or Netherlands or United States of America. Like the interviews were canceled, their status is unknown, and so people are they cannot work, they cannot get any money, they are obliged to live on 40 or 50 euros a week that they get from the government. And I think this is the problem now of those refugees, LGBTQ refugees in particular, and the refugees from Russia and Belarus in general. They cannot get the same level of attention that they used to get before. And I think this is what LGBTQ community all over the world might have to speak about now, because these people still need help and still need our attention. So what about me? I also had the same shift before February this year. I was writing a lot about LGBTQ problems. Now I moved from Russia to Latvia because we couldn't work in Russia anymore. Radio Free Europe office was closed, and our accounts were arrested because we didn't follow the law for the foreign agents, and so we have got like I already stopped counting how many $1 million of fines our radio stations got in Russia. And so now me, as well as my colleagues, are obliged to work more on the war issues rather than on local LGBTQ questions that still are important in Russia. Yes, this is it. I think. Hello?
Oh yeah, there we go. Sorry, cut up. So, oh, can you? Thank you so much, Sergey. I've shared the links to both A Different Childhood with an article in
Oh, thank you.
Oh, sorry, Sergey. Did I cut you out?
No, you didn't. I just said thank you.
No, thank you. Thank you. I've also shared the link to an amazing interview and index around the gospel according to. And again, for me, I see the patterns, just how Section 28, as Amanda talked about, I also shared a link to a really good article about Section 28 activism, inspires the Don't Say Gay template, the gay propaganda law in Russia, the LGBT free zones in Poland. They're all inspired by Section 28. So obviously just how tyrannical regimes are inspired by each other's laws, we on the ground are also inspired by each other's resistance and writings and strategies. Any questions from any of the panelists or attendees for Sergey? Oh, Amanda, yeah. Oh, you're on mute.
I wondered, thanks, Sergey, and for everything you do. I'm wondering, is there any work going on currently for queer refugees from Ukraine, particularly those living with HIV? Is there any queer-led work happening there?
I have to admit I have no ideas about Ukrainian LGBTQ community and the work they're doing. I don't know. Okay. I know that in Ukraine they did try to hold their Pride a couple of years ago, and before the war was obviously. And actually, they did that in Kiev. They were more protesters against the Pride than the Pride itself, but it was protected by the police, etc. So actually, the big difference between Ukraine and Russia in this regard is that in Ukraine they try to follow sort of European path and protect this community, and in Russia the state is against the community. The same with HIV, both in Russia and Ukraine, HIV positive people, they receive treatments free. So in Russia, we expect more problems now with the medicine because of the war, basically. So what they do for HIV positive people in Russia, they change their schemes and they put them on Russian generics, which are much worse than when the foreign ones with more side effects, etc. But as they don't have any, actually nobody knows if it works basically or not. So this is another big problem.
Thanks.
Abby, go ahead. Then I have a question, and so does somebody else.
Sorry, I just wanted to add slightly on, I know you asked specifically on Ukraine, and this is just something that I've had to do research thing. There is there's an organization called Our Rights International, which is an organization to help support, help spread LGBT resources, and they do have a Ukraine emergency fund, which is specifically for helping LGBT refugees during this time. So I just wanted to throw that out there as a resource that is currently happening.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Sergey, there's an article in the New York Review of Books about Latvia, and which I read after knowing that you were going to be part of this panel, and it about the Victory Garden Monument having whether it should be torn down, which is commemoration of sorts of Russia's rule over Latvia for almost 50 years, from I think 1955 to 1991. So I'm wondering, and my apologies if you've already mentioned this, but why did you go to Latvia versus somewhere else? And besides not being able to, and risk of being persecuted for your activism in Russia, go to Latvia versus somewhere else, and what is it like, LGBT rights there?
in Latvia, I went because Radio Free Europe's bureau moved to Latvia. We have a big headquarters in Prague, Czech Republic, but Moscow office basically moved to Riga. It was not my decision. This is what I meant to say. But I think they took this decision because Latvia is a very Russian-speaking sort of country. In Riga, in particular, we have 60% of Russian-speaking population. So for many of my colleagues who don't speak foreign languages, they might be more comfortable to live. And also, it is close to Russia and Ukraine, and it is already difficult to report about your country from abroad. And maybe they just wanted to choose something which was like closer to Russia. Regarding LGBTQ, I don't know much about Latvia, to be honest, as I didn't choose this country to live. It's a very nice place. It was annexed by Soviet Union in 1939, before the Second World War, and then these monuments that they want to destroy. I don't have any feelings about this, but actually I spoke to many Latvians, both Russian-speaking and Latvians, because you have these two communities in the country, right? You have Latvians, and then you have Russian-speaking Latvians. Some of them are from the Soviet times. Their parents moved in there. Some of them are from like 18th century. Their parents were relatives were living there since 18th century. And so even youngsters, if you see like 25, 28 years old people, they are offended by these decisions. So I think there's several opinions on this monument. And for LGBT rights, I actually went to the Pride in Riga when I was beginning of June, and it was very nice. It was rainy and cold, as it's always in this town, but people were very positive and nice and fun. They were walking. And I think it's more what I did like about this is that the Pride in Latvia was not commercial at all. You don't have, I mean, there was some sponsors, but we didn't see them really. It was like really march of people. It was not like in London or in New York City where everything is on the huge platforms and organized and expensive and flashing. It was more down to the earth sort of thing. And also, sir, they actually voted the bill for the same-sex civil partnerships just a couple of weeks ago, maybe more, maybe a month ago. So this is they're doing this. So yeah, they're doing step by step.
Thank you. Now, a few participants have some questions for you. Steve Hassam again. What's the probability that Russia will pass the gay propaganda law for all adults, and what do you think the impact will be if it passes?
I think the chances are very high because they like a high position people speak about it, and I don't know. I mean, I don't know what's going to happen with the country in general and with all the people. I think it is extremely difficult to live in Russia now. It is more difficult if you're a journalist or activist, or if you're LGBTQ, or if you're a person of color, or if you're Muslim, like if you're any minority. Even without law, they were oppressing rights of LGBTQ people, so they will proceed to do that. Just one of my colleagues, a big time journalist, he got how much is that? $2,000 fine for doing an interview with gay activists. They didn't speak about. They were just speaking about LGBT activism actually. And so he got this fine because even with the old law, I mean, with the current law, where you cannot promote the non-traditional relationships among minors. So I think it will be the same. You couldn't just speak about anything like this.
And Charles wants to mention a Canadian LGBTQ refugee organization called Rain Road, for those of you interested, and is wondering, didn't Ukrainian refugees join the Pride March in Warsaw? I'm not too sure if she's talking about this year, or did you have anything to do with that?
I didn't have anything to do with that. Two of my friends actually from Russia, they went to Warsaw to this Pride. and Ukrainians as well. There was a big Ukrainian column, I guess, and there was also a sort of a fight between Russians who wanted to take part in this pride and the organizers of the pride, because the organizers, they said, we don't want any Russian flag. We don't want, like, if you're Russian and you're coming to the pride, keep quiet, you know. And some Russians got offended on this, and there was this whole Facebook discussions and more stuff. You know.
And one more, Matthew Sandell is wondering how hard it was for you to get out of Russia, and did you have to escape, or were you able to go easily?
I was able to go easily because there was no any criminal case opened against me. And I'm actually married with a French citizen, and I'm French citizen as well. So I'm in a sort of very privileged position comparing to lots of my colleagues and friends. So I just crossed the border. Lots of other people, they're in a terrible, terrible situation because some of them have jobs. And so they are offices, they're helping with them with visas, etc. Because Russians, as well as Belarusians, they need visas to any like sort of normal country, Europe or North America or Australia, whatever, Turkey. And so lots of Russians, they are in Europe with tourist visas, and they have no idea what to do later, and they cannot go back, and then they cannot stay, and it's sort of in between.
Amazing stories, and you've all had amazing stories. I think Amanda, Dan, can you give her the floor now, or what's next?
I'm just saying there's so many amazing questions. Amanda, and then we've got one more question for Sergey, and then JF Mulligan, a question for Abby. So yes, let's go to you, Amanda. Oh, you're on mute.
Sorry. So I don't know. I think because we've only got a few minutes left. Perhaps to just talk about what I'm currently doing, or rather what we recently did around Pride for the 50th anniversary for Pride here in the US. Here in New York. So that was 2019, and we've been able to have our Pride marches even through COVID. What we as activists just came to realize by 2018 that we just had enough of the outright commercialization of Pride in Pride marches that we're seeing all over the world. We have in New York, I believe it's one of the largest, but it was it's been quickly overrun by corporations and businesses. The organizers around our Heritage of Pride March would place them in prime positions on the march. And in fact, in 2018, most of the community groups were behind these the corporations. Like you had, the phone companies, sandwich shops, lawyers, all kinds, Google, everything. And we're just enough's enough. So we organized what's now known as Reclaim Pride. And since 2019, we had our 4th Pride this year. We organize grassroots, no police allowed, no permit, no police, no corporations, and no floats, just reflecting more like the spirit of Stonewall and going back to celebrating our community, our history, and in solidarity with other oppressed groups. So, in opposition to transphobia, homophobia, and really marching against the exploitation of our communities for profit, against corporate and state pinkwashing. And still, 50 years, it's been such an honor to be with you on this, Ted. 50 years, man. But in 50 years, so much has changed, and yet so little has changed. We're still seeing trans women, particularly trans women of color, murdered on a regular basis. We're still having police entrapment of gay men. We're still, in the US, we have no national anti-discrimination law for queer folks that protect us from discrimination in employment, housing, or anything else. So there, as much as we've moved forward, we have just as far to go. And I think just with that, I want to be able to respect the folks who joined us and have their questions answered too.
Can I just jump in before we go to questions and say thank you so much, Amanda? Again, you've just shared a tiny bit of I know what you do, and I've been so inspired by like not just bringing back to life radical queer pride, but the holistic work that you do, the foundational work that you do.
Thank you.
And thank you for jumping in. I got carried away with the conversation. I didn't see the time, and I know we don't have long left, but can you just share maybe like one or two links about both how we can support more and elevate more work that you're doing for Reclaim Pride, but also as part of the African Services Committee, any key other movements in New York? Because I know the work around health, housing, legal, social support, homelessness, this goes on in terms of the foundational work that you're doing.
It does. Well, I've been with African Services here in New York for since 2000 now, and we work with the African immigrant community. And very proudly, we have started. We're in our 4th year now of the first state-funded queer support and wellness program for an African-led organization, if you follow that. But really happy about that. And my advocacy work now focuses on like the intersection of immigration and health, mainly for those folks who are undocumented, living with chronic health conditions. And in terms of our LGBT group, really working with them around issues of basically the same, many of the same issues that all migrants and immigrants face, but of course with the added layers of the intense stigma that's still exists in immigrant communities, particularly immigrant communities of color, here and around the world. But a lot of my work in the 2000s, after I moved here to New York, was around global treatment access. And now it's focusing much more on immigration, queer immigrants here in the US, and services and policies that enable them to live a free and healthy life.
Oh, wow. Thank you so much, Amanda. And without the work that you have done and people like amazing Greg around HIV, I wouldn't be here. And access to medication. So I can't thank you enough. And please do share links. We've got very short amount of time. There's 3 questions. Sergey, we've got one for you. I think we've got actually a few for you. About the realities. Where and how do gay queer people come together in Russia? Are there clubs? Are they hidden? How do gay men get together? Dating apps? Are they good for gay Russian men to use? That's a question for you, Sergey. For Ted, yes, Peter, it was the switchboard that Ted was referring to. There is another question for you, Ted. From coming out in the 1960s to today, you've seen many ups and downs in the fortunes of queer rights. Are you optimistic about the arc of history bending towards justice for our community? To paraphrase Martin Luther King Jr. and President Obama. That's beautiful. And then Abby, we've also got a question for you. I think you've already seen it. Have you seen your question? Okay, who wants to go first with answering your questions? Maybe Abby, just paraphrase your question as well so that everyone knows. Do you want to go first, Abby?
Sure. It was just a question I picked up in the chat that was, talking about how social media and uplifting other voices, which I think is really, really fabulous, especially because that is becoming a really big thing right now with social media, the use of TikTok and Instagram for advocacy. I know for me personally, I've gotten with my fabulous opportunities to work with some news sites like USA Today and Teen Vogue. I've gotten the chance to recommend, name drop all sorts of different people. There's a really big collection of teen advocates within Florida, especially, that we are all constantly sharing and posting and recommending each other for everything that we can. And I know for me, I also have an article that I wrote for them that is hopefully coming out soon, in which I get to share some of my activists that I've worked with that specifically talk about being a queer youth of color, and all sorts of different stuff like that. So just the general idea, share, share, share. Yeah.
Thank you, Abby. Thank you so much. Sergey or Ted, do you want to go answer your question? Oh, Ted, you're on mute, babe. Can't hear you, Ted.
Yes, how I'm feeling about the future, it's a mixture of apprehension, but also excitement. At the moment, now that we've lost, that's the wrong word, ejected Prime Minister Boris Johnson, the candidates that are coming up are all talking in terms of a severe lurch to the right. And for example, there's one of the candidates, a woman called Kemi Badenoch, who I call Bad Enoch. If you do some research, you'll understand what that actually means. Who was actually an equalities officer, supposedly to look after the rights of women and the LGBT community, made a speech in which she made it very clear that she had no interest in either of those fields. Meanwhile, in America, there's a similar lurch to the right and extremism, as demonstrated by the Supreme Court with its Roe versus Wade reversal. And we have Clarence Thomas, one of the most extremist judges on the Supreme Court, talking about looking at other wins that our communities made over the years, such as same-sex marriage. So they're going to be pushing back. And this puts a tension of apprehension in me. But I am inspired by the other people on the panel, the people that are watching, people that I meet, because I know that we are fully committed to fighting on behalf of those who can't fight back themselves. We are fighting for our lives. We are fighting for the future. So it's a mixture of feelings, but I think that we will, in the long term, win.
Amazing. Thank you, Ted. Thank you so much. Sergey, your question, Han? You got
it. Yeah, I remember it. So basically, you have to, in terms of Russia, clubs and bars, etc. There's Moscow, St. Petersburg, and there's Russia, right? So in Moscow, St. Petersburg, there are bars and clubs, less now than before, but more business reasons. Like everywhere else, people tend to use applications more than clubs to meet. So youngsters, they go less and less to gay bars and clubs. Actually, if they go out, they go to sort of gay friendly or straight, whatever friendly places. You have applications, sure, they're much more dangerous to use in the southern Muslim regions because there you can be trapped by police or by criminals, and police wouldn't protect you, and this happens a lot, or even by just homophobes who don't want your money, just want to beat you, I mean, to punish you for being gay. Otherwise, the interesting thing in Russia is that the state is not protecting you. The state is oppressing you if you're an activist, if you stand out, but it's not like in Soviet Union. It doesn't go after you if you're just gay or lesbian. So your life is more complicated if you're an LGBTQ person than if you'd be living in Europe or North America, but it's still not as bad as if you would be living in Third Reich of Germany or Soviet Union.
And Sergey, how, just to kind of there's one more question actually. Thank you, Sergey. Justin, hello from Hollywood. Wow. Queer Britain, yeah, that's just started in King's Cross. That's I think it's near Permanent Queer Museum. I mean, I'm really you know, 8 years ago when I was talking about the start of Queer Tours of London, we didn't have I was moaning about the fact we didn't have a queer museum, a queer art space, a queer homeless shelter, and a queer community-run pub. And now we've got them all and a few more institutions. For me, it's exciting how things change and how we've got to persevere. Now we do have a LGBT homeless shelter, art space, community centre, the Queer Britain Museum, which are doing incredible work. And so I'm really excited by it. And Justin, if you want links with them or anything, then can link you up. Stephen, do you want to respond to Simon's question? And then we'll do a little quick go round to wrap up. Do you see Simon's question there, Stephen? Thanks for sharing the question, Simon.
Simon's question.
About pre-ordering.
Yes, let me put this in the chat.
Yeah.
Where you can get the book. If the Eventbrite page doesn't work, then just email me. And also, I'll take this time to thank all of the panelists. Thanks to you for all of you listening. You're all doing amazing work. Keep up the activism. Go Queer Power. That is, we have a lot to fight for, especially with the anti-LGBTQ legislation going around all over. And we owe a lot of gratitude to all of you.